The night was heavy with anticipation. The marble halls of Capitol Hill echoed with hurried footsteps, whispered strategy, and the low hum of political tension. Under the brilliant glow of the chamber lights, Rand Paul sat motionless for a moment, his hand hovering over the voting button. Every camera in the room was locked on him, a man torn between loyalty and conviction. Then, with a quiet exhale, he pressed, "Yeah." The sound was barely audible, but the reaction was deafening. Senators turned their heads in disbelief. Phones lit up across Washington as the news broke like a shockwave: Rand Paul votes with Democrats. The chamber erupted in chaos, gasps, murmurs, the scrape of chairs as aides rushed to report what had just happened. For years, Paul had been seen as one of Trump's most calculated allies, a libertarian voice who still played by the MAGA rulebook. But tonight, he had crossed the line, and everyone knew what was coming. At Mar-a-Lago, Trump was watching live. His jaw tightened, his face darkened, and before the broadcast even cut to commercial, his Truth Social feed exploded: total betrayal. Rand Paul sold out the American people. His followers swarmed online, calling for Paul's resignation, branding him a traitor. But behind the noise, behind the outrage, a different kind of voice began to rise, not from a politician, but from an artist. Denzel Washington had been silent on politics for years, carefully choosing when and where to speak. But as the night unfolded, something in him stirred, a sense of duty, perhaps, or outrage at the hypocrisy unraveling before the nation. He watched the coverage, the shouting pundits, the split screens filled with blame, and finally muttered under his breath, "It's time someone told the truth." And that moment, that calm before the storm, would set off one of the most unexpected political showdowns in modern American history. The following morning, America woke up to confusion and anger. News anchors filled the screens, voices overlapping as pundits debated Rand Paul's move. Was it strategy, self-preservation, or open defiance? Hashtags like #PaulBetrayal and #MAGRevolt trended across the nation. But in the midst of all the noise, a quiet announcement appeared on the ticker at the bottom of every major network. Denzel Washington to appear live on The Nation Speaks Tonight. The internet stopped. Denzel Washington, the man who rarely spoke about politics, who chose words like a craftsman chooses tools, was stepping into the chaos. Within hours, millions tuned in. Studio lights glowed as the host leaned forward, clearly aware that history might be written that night. When Denzel finally appeared, wearing his trademark calm expression, the room went silent. He didn't waste time. "America's problem," he began, voice low but commanding, "isn't left or right. It's power, and what people are willing to do to keep it." His eyes didn't blink, his words slicing through the air like glass. Rand Paul made a choice. You can call it betrayal. But ask yourself, what kind of system makes men betray their conscience just to survive? The studio was dead still. Even the host hesitated to interrupt. Denzel continued, his tone tightening, "And as for Trump, you built a movement on loyalty, not truth. Loyalty to a man, not to the people. That's how corruption grows. That's how empires fall." Social media exploded. Within minutes, "Denzel exposes Washington" was trending globally. Some called him brave. Others called him reckless. But everyone agreed on one thing: Denzel had crossed the invisible line between Hollywood and power politics, and there would be no turning back. At Mar-a-Lago, Trump's advisors scrambled. The former president, visibly furious, demanded a response. "He's just another actor playing hero," Trump barked to his staff. "He wants attention. Fine. Let's give him a show." And that's how the stage was set for a clash between two of America's loudest symbols, one of raw authority, the other of moral conviction. By the next night, every television in America was tuned to one place: Trump's live rally in Texas. The air crackled with anticipation, red hats waving like flames in the sea of noise. Cameras zoomed in as Trump approached the podium, his face a mixture of fury and theatrical composure. He didn't even greet the crowd before launching in. Denzel Washington, he growled into the mic, a Hollywood hypocrite. Talks about truth while making millions lying for a living. The crowd roared. Trump's hands carved the air, his words pulsing through loudspeakers. He thinks he can lecture me about loyalty? About America? Please. I built this country back from ruin while he read scripts written by left-wing elites. Each line hit like a punch. The audience, hungry for confrontation, chanted, "Trump! Trump! Trump!" while pundits backstage exchanged uneasy glances. It wasn't just another rally speech, it was personal now. Trump's tone was sharper, his phrasing colder. He says I'm afraid of the truth, he sneered. He's the coward, too scared to pick a side, too scared to get his hands dirty for his country. Within minutes, clips flooded social media. Hashtag Trump vs. Denzel, hashtag Hollywood hypocrite, and hashtag Cowardgate exploded online. Denzel's name was everywhere, dissected on talk shows, debated by analysts, weaponized by influencers. But Denzel didn't respond, not yet. He was waiting, watching, thinking. In Los Angeles, the city of illusions, he sat alone in his home office. The room was dark except for the faint light of the television replaying Trump's speech. Denzel's expression was calm, almost unreadable, until one particular line played again. He's the coward. Denzel leaned forward, muttered softly, "Coward? You'll regret that one." He turned off the TV, stood, and picked up his phone. The call he made next would change the conversation forever, not just between him and Trump, but across the entire political landscape. Because this wasn't just about words anymore. It was about who controlled the story, and Denzel was about to take the microphone back. 3 days after Trump's rally, America was bracing for another storm. News outlets teased a special live broadcast with Denzel Washington. No one knew what to expect. Social media was a war zone of speculation. Would he apologize? Strike back? Stay silent? When the clock hit 8 p.m., millions tuned in. The screen faded to black, and then there he was, Denzel Washington, seated in a modest studio. No flashy lights, no crowd, no applause. Just truth waiting to detonate. He began quietly. "When I was a kid," he said, eyes locked on the camera, "my father told me, courage isn't about how loud you can shout. It's about standing for what's right when the world tells you to sit down." He paused. Then his tone hardened, slicing through the air like steel. "Donald Trump calls me a coward. But here's the truth, a coward is a man who hides behind crowds to feel powerful. A coward is someone who divides his own country for attention." The studio fell silent. You could hear the breath he took before his next line. "Mr. Trump, you built your empire on fear and fame. But I don't need applause to speak the truth. I'm not the one afraid of losing control, you are." The internet erupted. Within seconds, hashtag The Real Coward was trending #1 worldwide. Clips spread like wildfire, from TikTok edits to late-night montages. Even political analysts couldn't hide their shock. CNN called it the most powerful televised confrontation since the Nixon era. Fox News labeled it Hollywood arrogance gone too far. But regardless of politics, everyone agreed, Denzel had delivered a speech that hit the nation in its core. Somewhere in Mar-a-Lago, Trump watched the replay in silence. Advisors whispered around him, unsure if he was angry or impressed. Then, with a cold smirk, he muttered, "He wants a fight? He's got one." The next chapter wasn't going to be a debate. It was going to be war, one fought with words, ego, and the future of America's conscience on the line. By sunrise, America was no longer just talking, it was boiling. Every news anchor, every podcast, every influencer had one topic: Denzel versus Trump. Hashtags like hashtag The Real Coward, hashtag Trump meltdown, and hashtag Hollywood war dominated every feed. Inside Mar-a-Lago, the atmosphere was thick with rage and strategy. Trump's advisors huddled in the golden-lit dining hall, their voices hushed but frantic. "We need to get ahead of this," one said. "He's making you look defensive." Trump leaned back, eyes sharp, jaw locked. "Defensive?" he scoffed. "I don't play defense." By noon, a press conference was called. Networks scrambled to air it live. Trump walked to the podium, his face calm but his hands gripping the sides tighter than usual. The room went silent. Cameras clicked. Then he spoke. "Denzel Washington," he began slowly, voice dripping with disdain, "is a talented actor, I'll give him that. But last I checked, this isn't Hollywood. This is America. And in America, we don't let spoiled millionaires tell us how to live, how to vote, or how to think." He pointed toward the cameras as if addressing Denzel directly through them. "He talks about courage. But courage isn't hiding behind scripts or studio lights. Courage is leading a nation, something he wouldn't understand if it hit him like a teleprompter." The reporters shouted questions, but Trump waved them off, delivering his most brutal line yet. "He says I divide America. He's the one dividing it, by pretending he's better than everyone else. He's another elitist who thinks patriotism is a performance." The crowd gasped. Some clapped. The spectacle was undeniable. Trump had turned Denzel's words into ammunition. Within hours, conservative pundits rallied behind him, calling Denzel Hollywood's last desperate voice. But something unexpected happened too. Millions of Americans who once stayed silent began to speak. Veterans, teachers, even former supporters of Trump started posting under a new tag, #StandWithDenzel. What began as a feud was morphing into something much larger, a cultural reckoning between two visions of America. One built on dominance. The other, on integrity. That night, as the headlines screamed, "Trump strikes back," Denzel sat in his quiet Los Angeles home, scrolling through the reactions. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. He was preparing. Because he knew, Trump had just thrown gasoline on a fire that was already out of control. And the next move would decide who got burned. 3 days later, the country held its breath again. The White House feud had turned into the only conversation happening across America. News tickers, YouTube thumbnails, and late-night monologues all pulsed with the same energy: Denzel versus Trump, round 2. When Denzel finally appeared, it wasn't on a studio set or a late-night show. It was on the steps of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. The sun was setting behind him, painting the sky blood orange, a cinematic frame that no Hollywood director could have crafted better. He wore a simple black suit. No teleprompter. No notes. Just a microphone and conviction. The crowd stretched for blocks, a mix of activists, veterans, students, and families holding signs that read, "Truth has no party." He began in a low, calm tone. "I've been called many things, a coward, an elitist, even a fake patriot. But I'll tell you something, patriotism isn't about wearing a flag on your chest. It's about protecting the people who live under it." The crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras zoomed in as he lifted his hand to quiet them. His voice grew heavier, more urgent. "Donald Trump talks about courage. But courage isn't mocking the weak, or silencing the truth. Courage is looking at your country, wounded, divided, scared, and saying, we can be better than this." He paused. The silence was powerful. Even those watching from home leaned closer to their screens. "America doesn't need another performer," Denzel continued. "It needs leaders who know that words can build or break nations. It needs people who don't just talk about greatness, but earn it." Within minutes, the internet exploded. CNN called it the speech of the decade. The New York Times described it as a sermon for a fractured nation. On social media, a single phrase went viral, #WeCanBeBetter. But not everyone was inspired. In the West Wing, Trump's inner circle gathered around a laptop replaying Denzel's words. The former president sat motionless, eyes fixed on the screen. After a long silence, he spoke in a low, cold tone. He thinks he can out-talk me. Let's see how he handles truth under fire. That night, political strategists began leaking footage, old interviews, and edited clips, anything that could smear Denzel's credibility. What had begun as a debate was transforming into an all-out information war. America was no longer just watching a feud. It was choosing sides in a cultural civil war, and neither man was backing down. Within 24 hours, the storm hit like a digital tsunami. Every major conservative outlet was running the same headline. Denzel Washington exposed, the Hollywood hypocrite. Clips were edited out of context, his past speeches twisted, his interviews cut to make him sound arrogant or anti-American. Fox commentators called him a failed activist trying to play hero. One host sneered, maybe Denzel should stick to pretending to be a leader on camera instead of pretending in real life. The smear campaign was brutal, and it was working. Polls shifted. Public sentiment split sharply down the middle. Trump supporters flooded social media with memes and mock videos, turning Denzel's most powerful lines into punchlines. The chaos was exactly what Trump's team wanted: distraction, division, and dominance. But what no one expected was Denzel's next move. He didn't go on CNN. He didn't post a fiery video. Instead, he appeared, unannounced, on a small, independent podcast called The People's Mic. No teleprompters. No makeup. No PR filters. Just a simple wooden table and a voice ready to speak unvarnished truth. The host asked the first question softly. Denzel, they're calling you a fraud. What do you say to that? He leaned forward, eyes steady. You can fake applause. You can fake headlines. But you can't fake character. He continued, his voice low but sharp. This isn't about Trump or Denzel. This is about what kind of country we want to be. Do we want to live in a place where truth is edited for ratings, or where it actually matters? For the next 30 minutes, he spoke with the precision of a preacher and the calm of a man who had already seen the fire and decided to walk through it anyway. Clips of the interview spread faster than Trump's propaganda. Within hours, #YouCan'tFakeCharacter was trending worldwide. Even some conservatives began admitting privately, he handled that like a statesman. Trump's team panicked. Their plan to bury Denzel had backfired. By trying to silence him, they'd turned him into a symbol, a voice for Americans who felt ignored, manipulated, and tired of the noise. That night, millions tuned in to rewatch his podcast appearance. And as Denzel's words echoed across the internet, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a PR battle anymore, it was a movement. The next day, Denzel was invited to speak at a national town hall on unity. And everyone knew, if he showed up, the country would be watching. The stage was set for what the media called the night America couldn't look away. A nationally televised town hall, the first of its kind, meant to discuss unity, accountability, and leadership in America. 2 guests were confirmed, Donald Trump and Denzel Washington. No moderators. No scripts. Just 2 microphones and a live audience of 20 million Americans watching from coast to coast. The room buzzed like an electric storm before lightning. On one side of the stage, Trump stood in his signature navy suit, red tie hanging like a flag of defiance. Across from him, Denzel stood tall, calm, wearing a dark charcoal jacket, no flashy pin, no rehearsed grin. The contrast was striking. The first question came from an audience member. Mr. Trump, Mr. Washington, do you believe America is broken? Trump grabbed the mic first. Broken? No. But it's under attack. By people who hate success. By people who hate strong leadership. And yes, by Hollywood elites who think they're smarter than the American people. The crowd erupted, half cheering, half booing. Trump smirked. He was in his element, chaos. Then Denzel took the microphone. The room instantly fell silent. America isn't broken, he said slowly. But it's bruised. And the bruises don't come from people asking questions. They come from people refusing to listen. He turned slightly toward Trump, not as an actor, but as a man who had nothing left to prove. You talk about strength, Mr. Trump. But strength isn't shouting louder. It's standing taller when the truth hurts. It's owning your mistakes instead of blaming the world for them. Trump interrupted, voice sharp. You wouldn't last one day in my shoes, Denzel. Not one. Without missing a beat, Denzel shot back. And maybe that's the problem, sir. Because no one should live their life walking over people just to stay standing. The crowd gasped. Cameras zoomed in. Even the moderators froze for a moment as tension thickened in the air like smoke. Trump's face reddened. You think you're some kind of hero? He barked. No, Denzel said quietly. Just a citizen who still believes this country deserves better than fear. The audience erupted into applause so loud it shook the studio walls. Even some of Trump's supporters stood, clapping reluctantly. Online, the broadcast broke viewership records. Clips of Denzel's words flooded every feed within minutes. It's not about shouting louder, it's about standing taller. For the first time in years, the American conversation wasn't just about sides, it was about truth. But as the cheers echoed into the night, Trump's campaign team was already moving behind the scenes. The next morning, they would strike back with something even more dangerous, not words, but power. The morning after the debate, Washington woke to the sound of chaos. Every major outlet screamed a new headline. White House sources questioned Denzel's loyalty. Leaked emails revealed Denzel's ties to foreign interests. Except, none of it was true. Anonymous documents appeared on political blogs overnight, carefully forged, time-stamped, and spread across fringe networks before being picked up by mainstream ones. The fingerprints were clear to anyone who knew the game, a coordinated digital strike. Behind closed doors, Trump's team celebrated. One aide laughed, we gave them a new script, and the whole country's performing it. But what they didn't realize was that Denzel wasn't just an actor, he was a man who understood the power of a pause before a comeback. For 12 hours, he said nothing. No tweets. No interviews. Cable hosts speculated that he was in hiding. Commentators mocked, guess Hollywood doesn't have the courage to face the heat. Then, that evening, everything changed. At precisely 8 p.m., a notification hit every major social platform. Denzel Washington Live, Truth has receipts. Millions tuned in within minutes. He stood in front of a simple backdrop, black curtain, no lights, no glitz. Just him and a monitor behind showing screenshots, timelines, and data trails. I've played many roles, he began. But this isn't a movie. This is the truth they're trying to rewrite while you're watching. He displayed the fake documents, line by line, and showed the digital watermarks revealing where they had been edited. Then he traced the upload path to a shell company connected to a political consultancy funded by the Trump campaign itself. The chat section exploded. Reporters scrambled. The truth was unfolding in real time. You can't bury truth with lies, Denzel said, voice tightening with emotion. You can't buy integrity with a check. And you sure as hell can't scare me into silence. By midnight, #TruthHasReceipts was trending #1 worldwide. Fact-checkers confirmed everything. The so-called leak had been a smear operation orchestrated from within Trump's circle. For the first time, Trump's machine had taken a direct hit, and the people were watching it bleed credibility. The next morning, while journalists swarmed the White House for answers, Denzel stood outside the Lincoln Memorial, silent, staring at the reflecting pool. Reporters shouted questions, but he said nothing. Just before leaving, he turned slightly toward the cameras and said, "You can't expose darkness without standing in it first." The words would replay endlessly, becoming a mantra for a generation tired of manipulation. 3 days later, the world was holding its breath. Newsrooms buzzed with disbelief. The forged leaks had been traced, verified, and confirmed by federal investigators. Trump's campaign was officially under scrutiny for deliberate misinformation and manipulation of media infrastructure. It was the scandal of the decade. But while Washington burned with political fire, Denzel remained silent again. Not to hide, but to let the noise eat itself. He understood something most politicians never would: the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand long enough. Then, on a Sunday morning, a single tweet appeared on his account. "Meet me where America began." An hour later, the Lincoln Memorial Plaza was overflowing. Tens of thousands gathered: students, veterans, single parents, workers still in their uniforms. They came not for a celebrity, but for a voice that had refused to bend. Cameras rolled live across every network. Denzel stepped up to the podium, no teleprompter, no prepared notes. Only his deep, steady voice carrying across the reflecting pool. This week, they tried to turn lies into truth. They tried to make honesty a weakness. They tried to sell division as freedom. But I've seen what happens when good people stop believing the noise and start believing each other. He paused, the silence powerful. This country isn't red or blue. It's alive. It breathes through those who care enough to question power, no matter who holds it. A wave of applause rolled through the crowd like thunder. Phones lifted into the air, thousands recording the moment. Donald Trump may call me weak. He may call me a fraud. But let me tell you something: I'm not the one hiding behind chaos. I'm the one standing in the light, and I'm not moving. That line shattered the internet. Within an hour, #StandInTheLight became a global anthem, used by journalists, activists, and even former political rivals. The White House tried to issue a counter-statement, but it fell flat. Trump didn't appear on TV that week. For the first time in years, his silence spoke louder than his tweets. By nightfall, the Lincoln Memorial was still full. People stayed, lit candles, and sang softly as Denzel walked away under the Washington night sky, a lone figure, but no longer alone. He hadn't planned to lead a movement. He'd only wanted to speak the truth. But sometimes, truth has a way of becoming a revolution. As the credits of that day rolled across screens nationwide, one phrase echoed everywhere: on signs, in songs, in headlines. The real power isn't in the office. It's in the people who refuse to forget who they are. At the end of the day, truth doesn't need permission to be heard. Denzel didn't just speak, he reminded America that silence helps the powerful, and courage builds change. Whether you stand with Trump, Rand Paul, or neither, remember this: history always exposes those who hide behind lies. Stay awake, stay bold, and keep questioning. Because truth always finds its voice.